Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Caitlin and on this channel I upload all sorts of content relating to true crime, education and psychology related topics. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy and you haven't already, then please do subscribe and turn your notifications on so you know whenever I upload a new video. And welcome back to the final instalment of February 2021's True Crime Week. So if you haven't already seen, every day this week, beginning last Sunday, I uploaded a different true crime video every single day. So if you haven't already had a binge watch of all of them, then definitely go and do so. And I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has been enjoying this week, who has been showing their support. It really does mean a lot to me and it means that I know that you guys are enjoying these regular uploads. With today's case, we're going to be discussing not only a Doe case, but it's actually a Jane and John Doe case. So we're going to be talking about the Sumter County Does, who are often referred to as Jane and Jock Doe. So if you'd like to hear about the case, the discovery, all the theories, and then the most recent update in the case, then keep on watching. But before we get started, I'm just going to zoom through my usual disclaimer that I like to include at the start of all my videos, just letting you guys know that I'm not claiming to be an expert in this case or any of the other cases that I cover over on my channel. I'm simply relaying the information I'm able to find myself through research of certain sources on the internet, and because only certain sources are accessible to me, it means I may get things wrong, leave things out or mispronounce things. I apologise if I do any of those things. I'm not trying to cause anyone any harm or an injustice. I'm simply working with the information that I have available to me. I do also just want to apologise if you do hear any movement in the background. There is a lot of wind going on outside today and it's knocking on all the windows and walls and everything, so I apologise if you hear that. But yes, with all that being said, we shall just go ahead and get started discussing the case of the Sumter County Does. On August the 9th in the year of 1976 in Sumter, South Carolina, at just past 6 AM, a trucker named Martin Durant had been travelling down a dirt road between two main roads when he discovered a pair of human remains lying on the side of the path. After realising what it was that he had discovered, he headed to the nearest store where he then informed the employee of his discovery, and this employee then had been the one to contact the police department. And the finding of these remains had been very sudden and unexpected, and the local authorities had immediately set out in an attempt to establish who the pair had been and what had happened to them. So as I said, the truck driver had discovered two bodies on the side of the road, and one of them had been a male and one had been female. So I'll start by discussing each of the victims and their descriptions and what authorities have sort of discovered on the remains before then going into potential scenarios and what have been considered in order to understand what had happened to the two victims. So starting with the male victim, who was later named by the media as Jock Doe. Upon examining the remains of the male victim, the authorities had placed him at being somewhere between 18 and 22 years old. But this had then been argued by a forensic dentist who had examined his teeth, who placed him at being over the age of 27. And as a result of this contrasting professional opinion, the victim's estimated age had been altered in the official reports at being between 18 and 30 years of age. The authorities had seemingly sort of been under the impression that he had been of a slightly younger age, as he appeared to be of a smaller build and because of the type of clothing that he was found wearing. So upon discovery of the remains, he had shoulder-length brown hair and he was wearing Levi branded blue jeans, a red t-shirt with the slogan "Cause America Light Beer" written across the front, and then on the back had been a Snoopy design with Camel Challenger GT Sebring 75 written across it. And authorities had been able to determine that this particular t-shirt had been sold as part of sort of a promotional item at the Sebring races held in Florida in 1975. He'd also been wearing a Bulova Accutron watch with the serial number H918803, and so the authorities had made an attempt to track down the sale of this particular watch in an attempt to be able to determine an identity of the victim. They were able to determine that the watch had been specifically made in 1968, but upon the company's downsizing period in the 1970s, a number of their sales records had been destroyed, meaning that they couldn't narrow down any path of distribution or selling. He'd also been found wearing a 14-karat gold ring with a grey star sapphire stone on the front, and it had the initials JPF engraved on the inside of the band. In his possession, he also had a box of matches from Grant's truck stop. When the victim's remains had been examined, they discovered that he had a 4-inch scar determined to be from an appendectomy surgery on his lower right abdomen, as well as a number of scars on his back and shoulders, which were theorised to have been obtained from potentially his activity activity in any sort of contact sport. The young man was noted to be Caucasian with an olive complexion, noticeably bushy eyebrows, and he stood at just over 6 feet tall. Another interesting note made by the forensic dentist had been that the work that had been carried out on his teeth had been impressively extensive, and they believed it was likely that this dental work could have been carried out in some other country outside of the US. It seemed to them that he had been partway through an extensive restoration of his teeth and showed evidence of a particularly unusual form of root canal having been carried out. And because of all this extensive dental work and the worth of the ring that he was known to be wearing, authorities had been under the impression that this young man was likely from a rather wealthy or affluent background. Now, with the female victim that was discovered, authorities had determined that she was likely a few years younger than the male victim. Initially, the age estimate had been between 18 and 20 years old, but this was then later altered to between 18 and 25 years old. She had been around 5 foot 5 inches tall, with an olive complexion and reddish brown shoulder length hair. She also had 2 noticeable moles on the left side of her face near to her mouth. And initially, due to the similar descriptions of their appearances, many had speculated the possibility of the pair of victims having been siblings. The coroner, upon examining the remains, had specifically noted that she also had unusually long natural eyelashes. And overall, the pair both appeared to be extremely well groomed and that they'd taken great care in their appearance. The female victim had also had some dental work carried out in her past, but not quite as extensive as the male victim. So specifically, all of her back teeth had fillings in them and all of the other teeth were noticeably straight. Unlike the male victim, she had no scars on her body, neither surgical or otherwise, and it was determined that she'd never been pregnant in her life. And in terms of the clothes that she was found wearing, there was a white muslin blouse layered on top of a pink halter top, blue cut-off denim shorts, and a floral scarf that had been tied around her waist as a belt. She'd also been wearing wedge-heeled sandals with the branding Stride Right that were lavender and hot pink, as well as 3 specific rings. One ring had been a large black sort of long stone with small patches of turquoise inside. The second was a large feather shape attached to a coral and turquoise stone, and the third had been a metal band with red, white and blue stones embedded into it. Now, something specifically noted by the authorities had been that neither of the victims had been wearing any underwear. And in a lot of sources I read, strangely, there appeared to be a lot of focus on the fact that the female victim was found to have unshaven legs. In terms of cause of death of the pair, they had each been shot 3 times, all in their upper chests and back. And the weapon used was believed to have been a .357 caliber revolver. Neither victim had been carrying any form of identification on them, and authorities had a particularly difficult task of identifying the pair from the information they could collect from the remains. It was known that a man who had been recurrently described as being a hermit had seen the pair in the early hours of the morning on the day their remains were discovered on Lochlear Road, which was the dirt road in which their remains were later found. This man had told the authorities that he had only seen the pair from a distance and he'd seen them exiting a vehicle. He claimed that he didn't see much past this point, with some sources stating that he had heard gunshots but hadn't returned to investigate, and others stating that he hadn't heard anything. And over the years there have been a number of leads that the investigation have followed in an attempt to understand what had happened to the Sumter County Does and exactly who they were. During the investigation, authorities had taken a trip to Brunswick in Georgia to meet with a couple whose missing daughter and her ex-boyfriend had allegedly been similar in appearance to the Does. However, when the parents were shown images of the female victim, they stated that it wasn't their missing daughter, and then this was later confirmed when her friends were shown images, as well as a comparison of dental records. In terms of the male victim, the investigators had started speculating the possibility of names based on the initial JPF that was engraved inside of the ring he was wearing. They'd also hoped that the matches found inside his pocket would help their case further, and they established that the truck stop chain that these matches had been purchased from were actually a chain across Idaho, Nebraska and Arizona. Authorities had decided to release this information to the public in the hopes that someone may have encountered one or both of the victims in one of these locations prior to their deaths. And sure enough, a man soon came forward claiming that he believed he recognised the pair after meeting with them in Nebraska. Nebraska. This man had told the authorities that he was a mechanic, and he believed that he had been employed to carry out some repairs on a car, with the owners having matched the descriptions of the SUMTER County does. He also stated that he believed the vehicle had either Oregon or Washington license plates, but aside from this he couldn't really recall any other details, and sadly this account did not lead to any new developments in the investigation. One witness had told the authorities that he recalled seeing a couple matching the pair's description at a local fruit stand shortly before the discovery of their remains. I couldn't find any information as to how shortly, what this time frame was, but this was believed to be potentially useful in terms of potentially linking with the findings of the coroner, who had found that during the autopsy their remains showed signs that they had previously eaten fruit with possibly ice cream prior to their deaths. The witness who had called in this tip wasn't able to exactly pinpoint when this sighting had occurred and whether the pair had been in the company of anyone else, nor whether they had a vehicle with them. In the months after the discovery of the bodies, a man working in a campground in Santee, South Carolina, believed he'd met the couple matching the description of the does, and they'd informed him that they had been travelling to Florida. As this man had gotten to know the couple during their stay at the campground, he learned that the man had been from Canada and his father was a doctor, but the pair were no longer in touch as he decided that he wasn't going to continue on with his own career in a medical field. He'd also said that the man had identified himself as Jacques, hence him now being referred to as Jock Doe. Before leaving the campground, he had allegedly attempted to sell his expensive ring to this employee, but the sale didn't go through as obviously he was found to be wearing the ring when he died. In 1977, authorities in Latta, South Carolina, had believed that they may have arrested a man connected to the murder of the two unidentified victims. This man had been arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol, and as a result, authorities had discovered a revolver inside his vehicle that matched the believed murder weapon. As a result of the weapon being fire tested by the investigators, it was allegedly confirmed to be the murder weapon in the case of the Sumter County Doe murders. The man in possession of this weapon was never charged due to an alleged lack of evidence linking him to this specific murders, and he ultimately ended up passing away in 1982. But aside from this, I really couldn't find a lot of detail around how accurate these claims are and exactly who this man was. It was also considered the possibility of serial killer Henry Lee Lucas having been involved in the murders, as he was known to have been in South Carolina on the day of the unidentified victims' deaths. He'd also later admitted to having committed two murders in Sumter County, one in 1975 and one in 1983. However, there was significant doubt placed in this theory of him being related to the case, as he was known to have a habit of making false confessions, surely for the purpose of taking credit for murders he didn't commit. Henry Lee Lucas was not charged with the murders of the Sumter County Does and passed away in 2001. Due to the lack of information gathered by authorities after searching through each of these leads that they received, the victims remained unidentified for quite some years. The pair's remains were initially sealed in a local funeral home in an airtight casket with clear lids in an attempt for someone to potentially identify them. And over the years there would be many phone calls from parents and family members of missing runaways and young adults in the hopes to identify this couple, but sadly this remained unsuccessful. In terms of theories, many seem to follow the same sort of general direction. While initially some people had believed the pair to have been siblings, others believed that they may have just been hitchhikers who had met during their travels. There had been rather a lot of information gathered about the male victim in particular, and because of facts like this witness claiming that he referred to himself as Jacques and his father being a doctor in Canada, it seemed a likely enough assumption that he was Canadian. But the female victim remained much more of a mystery. Had she too started her journey with the male Doe in Canada, or had they met during their travels? What is interesting to consider is the lack of vehicle and personal belongings found with the victims. So if you recall, a hermit had spotted them exiting a vehicle in the hours before their death, and the pair didn't have any cash or belongings on them aside from clothing and jewellery. But all the believed sightings of the pair had given the investigators the impression that they were travelling around the country, and so they would likely have had a vehicle of some sort and a number of personal belongings with them, like more clothing and toiletries. It has been speculated that they could have been the victims of a robbery and a carjacking which resulted in their death, but it does raise questions of why they would still have a number of expensive pieces of jewellery on them. It may have been that the robbery had been interrupted before them having removed these pieces of jewellery, but it does seem rather unlikely considering the isolated location and the time of day the murders had occurred. In 2007, the bodies of the Sumter County Does were exhumed in order for DNA to be collected from the remains and tested. These initial tests had disproven the previous speculation of the pair being siblings, as they were shown to be not related genetically despite them looking rather similar. And then in 2019, the DNA Doe project had started working on establishing an identity for these two victims all of these years later. Over $2,000 was donated to the process of them extracting bone marrow from the remains in order to create DNA profiles that could then aid the research into the victims' genetic genealogy. And then in October of 2020, the results of these tests and ancestral backgrounds of the Sumter County Does had been released to the public. As a result, in January of 2021, the Sumter County Does were formally identified as being 25-year-old Pamela Buckley and 30-year-old James Freund. James Freund had been reported missing from Pennsylvania in 1975, while Pamela Buckley had been reported missing from Colorado Springs in 1975, although she was known to be originally from Minnesota. As a result of this, it's speculated that the pair had likely met at some point during their individual travels while hitchhiking across the country. And despite the pair being formally identified, the investigation into their murder remains an open case, as investigators still search for their killer. So that is the end of the Sumter County Does case. It's definitely a fascinating one. It is really incredible that the victims could have been identified this year, all those years later, but obviously there is still a huge mystery surrounding what could have happened to the pair and who was responsible. So I'd love to know your thoughts down below. There are a lot of speculated theories floating about that don't really sit on a lot of physical evidence, but still, if you do have a theory, then please do leave it down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you've been enjoying this week, and I hope you're looking forward to more cases in the future. I hope you found this interesting, and I'll see you guys very soon for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.